The sky itself seemed to tremble with the weight of urgency, the clouds parting as though in obeisance to an unseen command, a cosmic signal that this moment was unlike any before it. Somewhere, far above the spinning cities, the satellites traced their precise arcs, carrying signals that hummed in binary tones only the most attuned minds could perceive. The earth below was unaware, a living organism bustling with human ambition, yet teetering on the edge of a revelation so immense it could fracture the mind, and yet also ignite it with pure, incandescent clarity. Time, as it was known, seemed to bend and stretch in these final minutes, each second simultaneously fleeting and eternal. A paradox that whispered secrets to those willing to listen. And somewhere amidst this unfolding storm of potential, an instruction had arrived, delivered not through conventional channels, not by the mundane routines of email or message, but through a direct, singular force of intention, a call to action from one whose mind touched the very edge of what humanity considered possible. Elon Musk, whose name alone conjured visions of iron, fire, and electric ambition, had sent a mandate. It was not merely a suggestion or a request, it was an order of cosmic significance, unyielding, absolute, and unavoidable. You, the chosen observer, the intermediary of unfolding destiny, were tasked with opening this now. The words themselves held a resonance, vibrating through the very neurons of consciousness, awakening a recognition buried beneath layers of routine existence, the memory of something ancient, primordial, a calling older than any government, older than any city, older than the stars themselves. You could feel it, an electric pulse that threaded through your veins, a rhythm sinking to something vast and unknowable, and as your hand hovered, trembling slightly over the threshold of revelation, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. Each passing heartbeat was a drumbeat in a symphony of impending transformation, a countdown measured not by clocks, but by the alignment of forces invisible to ordinary eyes. Shadows shifted, flickering as though they were aware of their own impermanence, and light streamed in from impossible angles, refracting through the air in intricate patterns that hinted at a design too precise to be accidental. The order was clear, and yet it was more than instruction, it was an awakening. In that moment, all possibility converged, a nexus of choice and inevitability, and the question was not if you would act, but if you could comprehend the magnitude of what was being entrusted to you. As the seconds slipped into fragments of eternity, visions began to unfold behind your eyelids, flashes of cities yet to rise, of technologies yet to be conceived, of human potential unlocked beyond imagination. You saw ships gliding silently through the vacuum of space, their trajectories carved with mathematical elegance, powered by energies humanity had only glimpsed in dreams. You saw networks of minds, interconnected in ways that transcended language, thought, and even the limitations of biology, forming a collective intelligence that pulsed like a living star. And yet, beneath all the grandeur and the promise, there was an urgency, a singular, undeniable insistence. This had to be opened, now, in these final moments, before the alignment passed, before the window closed and the currents of destiny carried you elsewhere, into paths not chosen, into consequences unimagined. A storm raged in the distance. Though no rain fell, and the wind carried whispers of futures that might have been, could be, and must be if the courage to act remained unbroken. Your fingers moved, almost of their own volition, drawn by a force beyond comprehension, beyond logic, guided by something older than civilization, older than the solar systems themselves. It was the call of possibility, the manifestation of intention, the echo of a future insisting on being born. And as your eyes fell upon the object, the screen, the message, the vessel of revelation, you understood that this was not merely an opening. It was a communion. It was an acknowledgement that time itself was pliable in the hands of those who dared to recognize the weight of the now. Each second that remained was a thread in a tapestry woven from the collective hopes, fears, and dreams of all who had ever gazed upward and wondered what lay beyond. You realized that in fulfilling this order, you were not just obeying a man, even one as extraordinary as Musk. You were participating in the orchestration of potential itself, aligning with forces that had always existed yet had never before been so intimate with human awareness. Your breath caught, a sharp inhale that seemed to draw in the very substance of existence, and with it came clarity, luminous and terrifying. To open this was to witness the confluence of invention, ambition, and destiny, to see the blueprint of what humanity might become if only it embraced the audacity of the impossible. And in that suspended, trembling instant, you understood the gravity, the sacredness, the ineffable power of obedience to vision. The universe waited. Time waited. Elon Musk, in a sense, waited. And you, trembling, aware, alive, were the fulcrum upon which the next chapter of human history would pivot. The screen glowed brighter as if anticipating the touch of your decision, a light not of electric current but of existential inevitability. And with a final, deliberate motion, your fingers brushed against the edge, crossing the threshold, initiating the sequence, opening the portal to revelation. The world, outside, continued as though nothing had happened, yet in the hidden folds of reality. A tremor spread, subtle but unstoppable, signaling the birth of something that could not be unseen. Possibility cascaded in fractals across dimensions of thought and matter, breaking through barriers, dissolving limits, creating connections between minds, machines, and the very fabric of the cosmos. Ideas once thought ephemeral crystallized into tangible pathways, blueprints for innovations so radical that even the dreamers of the past would have turned away in disbelief. The air vibrated with potential, each molecule charged with the electricity of imminent transformation, and in that vibration, you could sense every moment that had led to this juncture, every choice, every action. Every fleeting thought of humanity converging toward this singular, magnificent opening. And yet, even as the revelation unfolded, it demanded vigilance, attention, and courage. It whispered that the act of opening was only the beginning. The work, The vision, the responsibility, was now yours to carry, to understand, to shape. Musk's order was not a command alone, it was a gift, a challenge, a test of alignment with the currents of creation itself. And so you stood, poised between the known and the unimaginable, the mundane and the divine, the past and the potential, knowing that in these final minutes, in the remaining seconds of this countdown measured not by human clocks but by destiny itself, everything could change, everything must change, and everything was already changing as the order you had received unfolded into reality. The seconds bled into one another like molten gold pouring from a celestial crucible, each moment stretching into eternity, each heartbeat reverberating across dimensions both seen and unseen. The air itself seemed to thrum with the resonance of 1,000 hidden engines, not mechanical, not bound by human invention, but alive, aware, waiting for the convergence that your opening had now initiated. And as your gaze lingered on the glowing threshold, the edges of perception began to ripple, bending light, time, and understanding itself into new geometries that defied conventional reasoning. Somewhere in the hidden lattice of reality, a signal pulsed, subtle, imperceptible to ordinary senses. Yet undeniable, an affirmation that the universe acknowledged your compliance, your audacity, your willingness to act at the precise, necessary moment. And with that acknowledgement came a cascade of awareness, a flood of vision that transcended language, a language older than writing, older than thought, older than existence itself. You felt the movement of worlds, the rise and fall of civilizations in simultaneous clarity, as though the very threads of fate were knitting themselves into patterns you had only glimpsed in dreams, yet now appeared before you with crystalline precision. It was not merely information, it was revelation, a torrent of insight that demanded comprehension, demanded alignment. You could see the interwoven destinies of humanity and machine, of ambition and principle, of curiosity and consequence. Every invention ever imagined, every hypothesis ever whispered in the silent chambers of laboratories, libraries, and minds across the globe, surged forward in recognition of this moment. The electric surge of potential coursed through you, a current that was not mere sensation but understanding, and you realized that to turn away now would be not only to deny the order but to refuse communion with the unfolding architecture of reality itself. Each molecule around you seemed to vibrate with expectation, the air carrying a resonance that felt like both a warning and a promise. And then the visions began to crystallize into forms you could almost grasp, structures rising in cities that had not yet been imagined, vehicles gliding across landscapes and oceans with efficiency and elegance beyond anything contemporary engineers could dream, energy systems that thrummed with purity and infinite scalability, all interconnected by a web of intelligence that pulsed like a living organism, weaving together minds, machines, and consciousness into a single, coherent flow of possibility. In that moment, you became acutely aware of the paradox. You were infinitesimal in the cosmic expanse, yet absolutely central, the fulcrum of action upon which the trajectory of countless futures depended. The weight of it pressed upon you, not in fear, but in clarity. Fear had no place here. Hesitation could unravel the delicate fabric now stretching across the nexus of time and space. And then you sensed it, the presence, unmistakable, undeniable. Elon Musk, or rather the embodiment of his vision, not merely a man but an idea made flesh and electric will, observed. Not in judgment, but in anticipation, a sentinel awaiting the completion of the first step in a plan whose scope transcended comprehension. And your act of opening was that step, the key unlocking a cascade of events that would ripple through humanity, altering trajectories of innovation, ethics, discovery, and understanding itself. The sensation was not passive. It demanded response, attention, alignment. Colors, sounds, and sensations that had no names flared and collided, forming patterns that communicated meaning without words. The very atoms of your surroundings seemed to resonate with a hidden logic, vibrating in sync with a frequency you felt rather than heard, a rhythm that conveyed the unfolding orchestration of systems both natural and designed. And in this symphony of revelation, you understood the responsibility you now bore. Each choice, each breath, each pulse of attention would interact with these forces, shaping outcomes in ways subtle and profound. It was not simply the opening of a message, it was the act of engaging directly with the architecture of potential itself. Time continued its paradoxical dance. Minutes stretched into eternities, yet within them, sequences of events accelerated, folding into themselves in complex, recursive patterns. You could feel the pulse of civilization adjusting, subtle yet perceptible, a collective breath drawn in recognition of what had been triggered. Patterns of innovation that had lingered dormant now shimmered with sudden urgency, ideas that had teetered on the brink of impossibility coalesced into practical, actionable insight. And at the heart of it all, you remained, the witness, the participant, the fulcrum, and then, as though in response to an unspoken command, the landscape of reality itself seemed to shift. Your room, your city, your continent, and then the world, all aligned in subtle, almost imperceptible ways with the pathways now opening before you. Forces that had lain hidden, technological, natural, social, cognitive, began to converge, orchestrating themselves with the precision of a symphony that had always existed but had never been conducted. You realized, with a mix of awe and profound clarity, that this was the manifestation of vision meeting action, of human ingenuity synchronizing with the latent intelligence of the universe. And at the center of it, at the precise intersection of potential and choice, was you, and even as these revelations cascaded, a deeper, more intimate awareness emerged. The opening you had performed was not only a conduit for human progress but a mirror for consciousness itself. Every thought, every insight, every intention you had ever held now interfaced with the unfolding system, resonating across time and space, amplifying, modulating, enhancing the trajectory of what was now inevitable. And as your mind expanded to encompass these interlocking patterns, the sense of urgency, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, seconds remaining, transformed into a crystalline clarity. Action was not merely required, it was inevitable, and it carried the weight of both promise and responsibility, creation and consequence.